My name is Ian Saunders, and I'll be going through the tool. So the custom model tool was created as a way to give you all, our users, the ability to test and play with some of the different strategies and applications that we have available here on the Nasdaq Dorsey Wright system. And many of those that we've been using through pre-made models that you've had the ability to follow over the years. The tool first came out, its first iteration of the tool came out as a static allocation tool, which we'll get into here in just a sec. And then the latest iterations of it, the Matrix Model Builder, as well as the FSM Model Builder, were recently launched and are going to be available to everyone there through the end of the year and into 2021, as you can see up at the top of the page. A few housekeeping items. If you do have any questions on anything that we're looking at when we're going through the tool, please do feel free to utilize the Q&A feature through the Zoom tool here. I'll do my best to answer as many questions as possible, and certainly be sure to circle back to any that I missed after we get through the content for the webinar this afternoon. We will also potentially be following up with any additional questions. They will be saved, so your questions will not go unanswered. They'll either be answered this afternoon or via follow-up. So the custom model builder tool is going to be found on the platform if you go up top to models and products, and then navigate down to custom models. If you click on that, it'll bring you to a page that looks pretty similar to the one that you see here in front of you. You may have some more examples or some different examples than the ones here. But when looking at it from a navigational perspective, up top, these live models are going to be models that you would have created and saved, and they're going to give you the opportunity to go ahead and view those or make any changes that you wanted to directly here from this custom models page. Those models are also going to be found, any live models that you've saved are also going to be found in the normal models page. You go to models and products and then click on models. There's a filter there on the left-hand side of the screen that will give you the opportunity to go in and view any models that you've saved, as you would any of the other pre-made models that we already have available for you here on the system. So we'll get into more of that a little bit down the road here, but just wanted to give you that reminder there. When you're looking down, you see these draft models. These are any models that you would have created and previewed, but not clicked on that save button to actually the system come in and check it according to the parameters that you've selected. So anything you're working on, you wanted to play with, you're viewing previews, but you didn't click on that save button, that's going to be housed down here underneath the live models. And as you can see from the warning, any draft models that you have not saved or modified in 6 months will be removed from the system. So just one thing to keep in mind if you're looking to kind of clean things up, or if you want to make sure something's saved, be sure to click on that save model button to go ahead and make sure it doesn't get deleted. Obviously 6 months can be a long time, but these past 6 months have certainly flown by. So definitely be sure to keep that in mind when you're going through and playing with the tool yourself. So, and coming in and actually utilizing the tool, as I mentioned, there's 3 different model examples or model use cases that you'd have the opportunity to come in and select. In order to create a model, you would perhaps unsurprisingly click on this Create New Model button. This will bring you over to the model creation stage, where you first choose the type of model that you want to use. So I mentioned you have the static allocation model, the FSM model, and the matrix model. You can note over here on the right-hand side, over on the far right, you can see a brief run through of the kind of the rules associated with the particular strategy that you want to implement. But in looking at it, the static allocation model, just from a broad perspective, is going to give you the opportunity to pick a set list of names and give static allocations to those names that the system is then going to take and backtest as far back as it can to give you a return of what that allocation would have looked like. We'll get into some examples of that in just a bit. We'll go through the other 2 first, but as some potential use cases you might be able to imagine, we could come in, let's say if you want to build your own kind of custom model here through the tool according to either the FSM or the matrix approach, you can maybe utilize the static allocation model to come in and take an existing client's portfolio and backtest that with those static allocations to see how the model that you would look at maybe compared to what their static allocation would look like. So just one potential use case. We'll get into some more here in just a sec. But the FSM and the matrix are going to be the majority of what we're going to be looking to cover here this afternoon. So we'll start things off with the matrix modeler. So you would click on matrix and then go up here and navigate to the actual creation stage using this next button. Be sure to keep in mind that you do want to utilize these next and back buttons throughout the model building process. You don't want to click on these kind of back buttons, just utilize these next and back up here in order to navigate through the different tabs that you see here up at the top of the page. So the first thing you can see over on the left-hand side, you have your name, your model symbol, your description. You can either edit those or input those now, or you can come back and edit those at any point in the model creation stage before you save it. So it's not necessarily something that you have to do right now. You can go ahead and play with things if you wanted to just take a dive in like we'll do right now. So the first thing you're going to have the opportunity to come in and see is the matrix type that you want to use. This is going to give you the opportunity to select either from system matrices, which are matrices that we have pre-made for you that you have the opportunity to come in and use, or custom matrices, which is anything that you've created. If you've created a matrix, you've saved that matrix, and you have it set to run daily, it should be built out there for you to utilize the history of that matrix in the custom model tool. One thing to keep in mind if you're utilizing the custom matrices, as you may know, the matrix tool itself does take a minute or so. Once you set the matrix and you save it, it takes a minute or so for that matrix to save. And then it will take a bit longer for the matrix to continue to build out that history. So one thing to keep in mind when you're going through, again, is as you can see up top, this is the beta version of the model builder tool. But just one thing to keep in mind, it's not going to be directly immediate after you save a matrix and you're able to view those matrix rankings. You might not be able to utilize it immediately here in the tool, but you will shortly. And of course, if you have any kind of issues or something's not showing up, you can always reach out to us here at Dorsey, Wright, and we will be more than happy to help you out and make sure you're squared away from a tech standpoint. So for the purposes this afternoon, we're going to utilize the system and one of the system matrices. So then you can go down to select a matrix category, and you have a variety of options that are going to be kind of pre-selected in here. We're going to go down to popular pre-mades, and then you have the opportunity to select a matrix. And we're going to go down and use the OEX matrix with money market and SPX EWI. So a few different matrices that you have the opportunity to come in and use. We'll just use this one for the test this afternoon. The OEX matrix is going to be looking at the S&P 100, and then we've added money market and the S&P 500 equal weight index, SPX EWI, into this matrix rank to give you a feel for where things sit corresponding to either the broader market, the SPX EWI, or cash, our money market proxy there. So once you click on a matrix, you see that populates some names over on the right-hand side of the page. This is going to be the matrix ranks for the particular matrix that you've selected. Looking down, you can see there are 104 names in this, or 103 names rather, in this particular matrix, and you can see all of those depicted here. So this is the latest matrix rank. You can see at data as of 12/9/2020. So any kind of matrix rank that you're going to utilize would have been as of the prior close. So that's as of Wednesday's close. This is what the ranks would have looked like. You can see everything here. It's just going to be white for now. But when we come in and we have actually select a strategy, that's when you're going to get some of these populated to see what your matrix is going to potentially hold. So when you're coming in here, you feel comfortable with this list. If you want to change the list, let's say you didn't want to include money market or SPX EWI or any other names, you can uncheck those particular names here, and you'll note that will turn red. As you can see up top, any red names are going to be excluded from the model. So it's not going to have any kind of potential for coming into the model if you didn't want to utilize it from there. So we'll go ahead and leave it in for now though. And then we'll go on over to the left-hand side, and you have this load optional template. So you obviously have the ability to come in and customize any kind of buy or sell criteria that you want to use, but we do have a few different pre-made strategies depending upon the matrix example that or the model example you're utilizing that we've kind of preset here as kind of rules of thumb to go off of, or potential ideas to go off of. So we'll go ahead and do this top quartile monthly, and you can see that will reload the page to change anything that would currently be held in the matrix according to your current criteria in blue. So you can see that we now have the top 25 names, because we're looking to target number of holdings, 25%. So the top 25 names are going to be held here in the model in blue, and any potential model holdings will be gray. So one thing to note there, if you want to change this, let's say didn't want to necessarily look at 25 names, you can adjust any of these parameters. Let's say we only wanted to hold 10. So I'm going to change this to number, and I'm going to change this to 10. And that's going to go ahead and reset the names there. So now the blue names are still going to be those names that the model would seek to hold based upon the current rules. So the top 10 names by matrix rank. The gray names are anything the model could potentially hold. So the way the rules are designated by this default, your buy criteria, the model could seek to buy anything in the top quartile, but it's only going to hold 10 at a time. So that might make more sense in just a sec when we get to some of the overlays, but the overlays tab gives you the opportunity to change your kind of rankings in the top quartile after something has come in based upon your buy criteria. So just one thing to kind of keep in mind, if you want to add some sector restraints or potential for maybe a technical attribute screen, like we'll get into here in just a sec, you want your buy criteria to be a little bit wider than the actual target number of holdings that you have. So target number of holdings does not need to directly correspond to your buy criteria here, but it does need to be either as many or less than your buy criteria. So just one thing to keep in mind. So we're going to seek to hold 10 at a time, but we could buy anything in the top quartile. So any of those names are going to be gray. And then we're going to sell out of anything when it moves to the 50% level or below. So it moves out of the top half of the matrix rank. The model is going to come in and sell that particular name and then buy whatever's the next highest name that we wouldn't already own according to our parameters. So feel pretty comfortable with these from here. At the top, 25% could potentially be purchased, sell out of anything if it moves in the top and it moves into the bottom 50%. Our evaluation frequency, we'll leave it as monthly. You do have the opportunity to come in here and select any other kind of time frame that you wanted to utilize. If you wanted to do weekly, you can come in and you can select which day of the week that you want to use. If you wanted to do kind of any other particular time frame from there, you can do that as well. We'll go ahead and leave it as monthly for now. So go ahead, monthly eval. We'll make sure that's on the last trading day of the month. You can also do a custom day if you wanted to as well. So say if you want to do the 15th of each month, you can come in and utilize that. But we'll go ahead and leave it as the last day of the month for now. So coming on down here gets into some of the advanced options that you have the opportunity to select. So by ranking method or ranking methodology by rank. You can change it to any of the other two ranks that we have included in the matrix. So by rank is going to be the ranking as defaulted on the matrix tool, the typical rank that you see in a matrix. Is the number of the names with the most relative strength by signals will be at the top of the matrix rank, and that's what you see here. If you change it to X rank or total rank, X rank is going to be obviously the number of names that are in a column of how many times a name is in a column of X's against the other members of the matrix, and then total rank is adding together the number of buys and the number of column of X's in order to get to a combined total rank. We would recommend kind of leaving as that default buy rank as that typical picture we look at for that longer term relative strength. But you do have the opportunity to change it and play with it to see how things look. Kind of one of the beauties of the model builder tool. There's a lot of kind of typical ways that we go about doing things, but if you want to change it up and see how things would look, you definitely have the opportunity to do that if you'd like. So we'll leave it as buy rank for now. Rebalance replace, and that's going to be on a trade. Do you want to rebalance the particular names? Or would you want to replace the name, just simply sell one and take that allocation and buy another? We'll leave it as rebalance for now as well. So I did have a question pop up here before we keep on going. Why have the sell criteria so far below the buy criteria? So when utilizing the matrix tool, I mean, by general kind of rule of thumb and what we've seen through most of our testing across all the different strategies that we've utilized the matrix kind of model in is buy top quartile, sell bottom half. It's kind of a good rule of thumb to go with. Let's say you have 20 ETFs, you want to buy top 5, you want to sell if it moves below. And the reason for that is you don't want to necessarily, let's say if we were just looking to hold the top 10 names, and you wouldn't want to necessarily sell it if it moved down to 11, because it might be back at 10 next week, right? You want to give it a little bit of room to move in order to kind of capture that longer term picture and not be so kind of near term focused. But then it's also going to drastically reduce the turnover associated with the portfolio. So one thing to kind of keep in mind too, that you will get at some turnover statistics that are going to be available on the previews page, which we'll get into here in just a sec. But by general rule of thumb, we want to give things a little bit of room to move, but moving out of those names when they've really shown weakness against the other members of the inventory you're looking at by moving into the bottom half is what we found to be kind of most prudent. But obviously that could depend on the inventory. And so if you're looking at a different inventory, you want to see what it looks like if you shortened that criteria, you can definitely do so and play with it from there. So great question there. So in looking down at the other advanced options that you have, again, so we're doing rebalance, buy rank. You can rebalance replace either on a trade or at every evaluation. So we may or may not have a trade at the end of each month. The system's going to come in and check it at the end of each month, but there may or may not be a trade. And so if you want to make sure that it's rebalanced to have 10% in each of the top 10 holdings at the end of each month, then you can come in and you can do every evaluation. You want to let things run a little bit. You can just do the on trade only, like it's going to be defaulted here as well, to not necessarily have it rebalance back to equal weight at the end of each month, regardless of if there's a trade or not. But we'll go ahead and leave it as on trade only for now. Drift tolerance is going to be how much room you want to let things swing before you rebalance. So if you want to increase that, that drift tolerance, maybe if you have a name that's been in there for quite a while, you want to let it kind of grow, its allocation grow in the portfolio a bit. You can increase this to kind of whatever percentage you were looking to utilize. 2% is going to be the default for matrix-based models. Or you could just remove the drift monitoring too, just to let names run as much as they were, but we'll leave it as 2% for now too. So then moving on down, we get down to sweep down indicator in matrix. So the sweep down indicators and options that you have here is going to give you the opportunity to select a name from the matrix and then move. If that name rises enough in the matrix ranks, you can sweep the allocation of anything that it's beating to another name or that particular name. So as an example, let's say we wanted to come in, we have money market and the S&P 500 equal weight index included in this matrix rank. So these are all looking at stocks in the S&P 100. But let's say we wanted to come in and see if money market rises enough in the matrix rank. Let's say if money market moves into the top 10 by this matrix rank, then we want to take anything that money market's beating and just sweep it to cash instead of holding those names that money market would be beating. You can do the same thing with the S&P 500 equal weight index. So let's say we wanted to utilize the S&P 500 equal weight index. We can come in, click on this drop down. Again, the sweep down indicator has to be a name in your matrix rank. So if you don't have money market included in your matrix, you can't utilize it as a sweep down indicator. Just one thing to keep in mind. But let's go down to the S&P 500 equal weight index. Let's take SPX EWI. Let's say sweep down rank. If it gets to 10 or higher, then we want to sweep to, let's do RSP, right? So we could sweep to any security. The security does not have to be included in our matrix. We can sweep if you want to use money market, but you want to sweep it to short-term treasuries, like a ticker BIL, so fun there. You can do that as well. If you want to make sure that anything that the model tells you to buy is something that you can actually go out and buy, and from a back testing perspective, it can be prudent to do that as well. So if we wanted to utilize a sweep down indicator, but we wanted to make sure if we're sweeping anything to it, we could actually go out and buy that name, then you can change to RSP for anything that SPX EWI would be beating. So as an example of that, if the S&P 500 equal weight index moved to a rank of, let's say, 6, right? It could take up 50% of the portfolio, and the remaining 50% would be any names that would beat the broader market. We'll go ahead and remove that for the purposes of this back test, but just as a potential use case, you could imagine maybe if you're looking at a shortened inventory of maybe some sector funds, could be pretty prudent to come in and say, okay, well, if I want to hold these sectors, but if the broader market is beating any of these sectors I would hold, then I want to just own the broader market instead. So it could be one use case to come in and utilize. Obviously, it could be others, but it can be helpful to come in and use that from kind of a risk management perspective. So we'll go ahead and back up and back out of the sweep down indicator for now, just for the testing purposes, but can definitely be helpful to come in and play with that. So at any given time, max position percentage you want per holding. So that's kind of, if you were using that sweep down indicator, you could limit it as well. If you don't want to have anything more than 50% cash or 50% in the broader market, you can change that parameter. And then if there's no viable holdings to your model, you can select a proxy as well. That will be if you have any kind of filters or anything you can add on the overlays page, which is on the next screen. If that causes there to be no holdings available, then you could select a proxy to use. But again, we'll go ahead and leave that as default for now. Probably will not come into our test. So now we feel pretty comfortable with what we're looking at. Really just kind of have the S&P 100 matrix rank in here, looking to buy the top 10 names, but we could buy anything in the top quartile and then sell out of those names if it moves in the bottom half. So we'll go ahead down here and click on this next button from here. And that takes us to the overlays page. So this overlay page is going to give you the opportunity to come in and choose some different criteria that you want to implement into your model. So if you're looking at it now, you see that the list is shortened pretty significantly from the list that we had on the prior page. Now you're only going to be looking at those names that are above your buy criteria. So I remember our buy criteria was anything in the top 25%. So it takes those 26 names, move those over here. What we can do from here is change the names that the model would hold. So you can see default sort by rank. So we can make sure that we want to hold anything that's in the top quartile from a relative strength perspective in the matrix. But if we wanted to change the ranking of those names in the top quartile, let's say we wanted to get at names that had lower volatility, right? We could come in and sort by a 3-year standard deviation to come in and say, okay, I want to make sure that any of the positions that I would hold are strong from a relative strength perspective. They're in the top quartile of the matrix we're looking at. But in terms of the names I actually want to buy from that top quartile, I want to buy the 10 least volatile by standard deviation. That could be one option you can utilize, and you can see when you change it to volatility, you get that volatility depicted here on the right-hand column. So again, this rank is going to remain static. So many of these names that are going to be more of the kind of least volatile areas or some of the lower ranked. But again, remember, all of these names are in the top quartile. So they're still strong from a relative strength perspective within the S&P 100. We just want to make sure we get at those names that are not as volatile as some of the others. So that could be one option. You could come in and do, let's say if you wanted to get at the highest yielding names, you can do that as well to get at names that have higher yield within the top 25% of the S&P 100. You can do that too. One thing to keep in mind is that you'll notice before when we had the default sort by rank, right? We'll go ahead and change it back to what we were looking at. Your earliest potential start date is going to remain up here at the top of the page. So based upon the normal default criteria, we can take this test back 10 years, right? We can take it back almost 11 years at this point, but we can take it back to 12/31/2010. And so if we change the ranking, just one thing to keep in mind, if you go to yield, you can notice that the earliest potential start date does shorten pretty significantly. We can only go back 5.5 years here. We don't right now, again, looking at the beta version of the model builder tool, don't have the opportunity to view dividend yields past that point. So just one thing to kind of keep in mind, if you do play around and change some of the ranking, that could affect your earliest potential start date. So just keep that in mind and be sure to keep an eye on that if it's something that you want to make sure you can take the test back as far as possible. So we'll leave it as default sort by rank for now. And then you can see down underneath that, you have the opportunity to add some filters or sector maxes. So if you wanted to make sure that any kind of names you held, you didn't get too heavily overweight in one particular sector, you could add a sector max to say, okay, I want to make sure that any of the sectors I have are going to be less than, let's say, 20%, right? You can come in and you can click that, and you can see that changes the rankings a little bit to go down and then just choose any names that are going to be, make sure you don't have more than really 2 names in any particular sector. This also is going to change things around to where you don't have enough high ranking names to fill out your list. And so that's where that money market, where we were looking on the prior page, where you have the opportunity, if your rules dictate that you don't have enough kind of allocation to move towards, it's going to move allocation to another area, and you can designate that particular area there. But just one thing to keep in mind, that if you do change some of these sectors, if you don't see 10 names, model's going to try to hold 10, but if it's not seeing 10 names here, you can set another area to go ahead and sweep to from that perspective there. So we'll go ahead and take that out and change it back to the normal kind of default top 10 that will pop up there on the right. But let's say we did want to add a filter. So instead of using a sector max, we wanted to use another filter. We still want to rank by the buy signals, but we want to make sure we're looking at high technical attribute names. So as I believe Chuck talked about earlier, and then we talked about kind of throughout our research, the technical attribute score for stocks, that score that goes from 0 to 5, 0 being the worst, 5 being the best, is kind of a nice all-encompassing scoring method to utilize, and typically looking to hold 3 or better. So you can come in and do TA score. Let's make sure it's greater than or equal to 3. And now that will reset the list on the right-hand side. So we're going to come in, the model is still going to seek to hold the top 10 from an RS perspective, but it's only going to hold those names that have a technical attribute score of 3 or better. So what that does, it comes down, we hold the top 6, we skip forward, we skip Caterpillar because those names are not favorable from an attribute perspective with attributes of only 2. They might have shown improvement against this particular matrix inventory, but that, again, that tech attribute score is separate. One thing to keep in mind. So maybe it hasn't shown enough improvement against the market, or maybe it's fell off enough, even though it's rallied, it's not in a positive trend. Could be a variety of reasons why it might not be favorable from an attribute perspective. But if you want to make sure you're only holding on to those 3, 4s, and 5s, could be a prudent route to come in and select this particular overlay. So now it's going to hold the top 6, skip the next 2, and then round you out there with the next 4 names by matrix rank. So feel pretty comfortable with this particular list. We like utilizing these, make sure we're holding those stronger technical attribute names within the top quartile of the OEX matrix. So if you like this particular criteria, that's when you can come over here, hit this next button, and then it's going to take you over to the last page to make sure everything's squared away before you run your preview. When you're looking at this page, you can see over on the right-hand side are going to be all the rules that are associated with your model. So you can kind of give these a check over, make sure everything's squared away for the rules that you want to utilize. And again, hitting create preview is not a kind of the end of this. It's just looking at a preview. You can come back and edit it. But just one nice thing to do to come in and make sure everything's squared away, make sure your rules are good to go. You can then come in, make sure your start date. So this is going to default to go back as far as possible. So we can go back to the end of 2010 as our start date here. And if you want to change that, you can do it from here. You can also do it on the previews page. Starting cash, default to 100,000. You can change it if you'd like there as well. The benchmarks are going to default to the S&P 500. We have a variety of optional popular benchmarks that you can come in and utilize. If you're utilizing total return names, you can come down and change those to total return index. But a variety of different options that you can come in and use. You can also use any of your pre-made models that you have here as a benchmark. If you want to go ahead and select anything you've already saved as a model, you can come in here and do that too. As that kind of taking it back to that initial use case with the static allocation model, if you take maybe a client's prior list of names, you set that as a static allocation model and save it, you could then come in and use that model as a benchmark within the model that you're looking to build here to kind of compare and contrast the prior strategy with one strategy that you have, just as a potential example. We're going to go ahead and click on, you can also enter any other ticker that we have on the platform as an alternative benchmark. So we're just going to do the OEX as the S&P 100, just to get at that alternative benchmark from there. The theoretical advisory fee, if you wanted to implement that, you can do that too, but we'll go ahead and leave that out for now. Then you can make sure your name and your draft or your name and symbol are all squared away. The name is just anything that you want the model to be called, so you can differentiate it. So we'll do virtual 1, and then model symbol. This again can be anything you want, but it has to all be combined, one word. So maybe we'll do test 1. And so just a reminder, or just as an aside, the model symbol, if you're going to use the model symbol, if you're going to save it, it's just going to be exclamation point, and then whatever you have is your model symbol. So you'll see that after you save the model, but just one thing to keep in mind, if you're looking to, these model symbols are only corresponding to your particular account. They're not something that anybody else can go in and bring up on the system. So only stuff that you can see. So that's why you can make it kind of whatever you want there from that symbol. Has the exclamation point in front, and then whatever you want it to be after that. Description, if you wanted to put in any kind of rules or any of the rule set that you've implemented. So maybe let's do top 10 OEX and TA greater than equal to 3, just as kind of just a run through. So instead of having to come in and maybe view all the rules, so you can just get a nice little feel for exactly what it is you're looking at maybe down the road. If you're comfortable with the way it looks and you want to go ahead and create the preview, you can click on this create preview button. And so that will go ahead and bring it to the preview creation stage. It does take a sec to load. So just for the sake of time, I have gone ahead and preloaded a particular preview here for us. So after you click on that button, you'll get to a loading page. And after that page is finished loading, you'll get to a page that looks like the one that you see here in front of you. So this is going to be the model preview page. Again, this is just the preview. So the model's not actually saved on the system. If you want to save it, you can click on this green button, but you can come in and check it out to make sure that it's doing what you want it to as well. So when you're looking at the page up top, you can see the kind of the model details, the initial details that you have there. You get a nice little performance chart underneath it with an adjustable or flexible kind of move. As you move down the chart, you can see the change in return from a cumulative standpoint. You can also adjust this chart to look at any particular time frame you wanted to directly from this nice little scrolling bar at the bottom. And then if you want to change any of the kind of parameters within the chart, you can click on this edit performance chart parameters. And then you can come in, maybe pick some other benchmarks. Let's say if you wanted to do the S&P 500 as well, you could come in and utilize that, update graph, and then it's going to go ahead and add that particular whatever other benchmark you wanted to utilize down here on the page too. Might change your colors a bit like you can see, but you can see those depicted there. If you wanted to take off any of those in the graph, you can just click on these just to see how things would look, and a nice customization there. Just to see what things would have looked like at different times. So any other kind of additional benchmarks, you can put in tickers here to view any other securities that you want to view as a benchmark here as well. Change your starting value, change your start date, change your end date. If you want to take, instead of just dragging the graph, if you want that 100,000 to start at a different time, you can implement that there as well. So we'll leave that as is for now. Bring that pop-up back up. So down underneath the graph, you can get at some more in-depth statistics that are going to be available there for your model. You can see the return information is going to be up top. So year-to-date return, annualized returns, 1, 3, 5, and 10 if it goes back that far. And then the since inception available there as well. So you can see the model's done pretty well on a year-to-date basis, 32%, not too shabby. Besting the benchmark, the broader S&P 100 at 15% return there. And we get an outperformance from a cumulative growth standpoint, annualized growth standpoint as well. Some of the other statistics available beneath that, standard deviation model is a little bit more standard deviation, but the returns make up for it. So Sharpe ratio there is a little bit better than the benchmark. You can then see that this max 6-month drawdown is a little bit worse for the model there, but you're not getting at that much turnover for a 10 stock model. It's kind of interesting to note, only 75% turnover on an annualized basis. So not too much, not kind of less than what we might typically see, depending upon the matrix inventory that you're looking to. But you might assume that with 100 names being ranked in a matrix and you're looking at it every month, that you might have the potential for a fair amount of trades to occur. But 75% isn't too shabby for a 10 stock position model looking at 100 names. So down underneath that, you can see what any of those trades would have been at each model evaluation. So any of the looking back, it's going to look back at every time there was a trade. You're going to see those trades depicted here in this nice little adjustable graph. So coming over to the left, you can see any additions or deletions. Any additions would have the plus sign, any deletions would have the minus sign by them. And then anything just in black would be things that just remained static and didn't change. So you can see those changes throughout time here. You can also export these changes to an Excel file if you'd like. You can also export the returns in the whole kind of preview page to an Excel file if you'd like as well. So this page is printable. You can export it to an Excel or CSV, comma separated value file, and kind of do what you want with it from there. Down at the bottom of the page, you can see we have the annual model returns compared against the benchmark, and then you see the excess returns depicted here also. So it can be kind of helpful to come in and see that in a year-by-year breakdown, in addition to the other ways that you can view the performance up top. So if you're comfortable with the way the model looks and you want to go ahead and save it, you can go ahead and click on the Save Model button. We'll go ahead and do that here for now. But if you weren't comfortable with it, you can hit this Exit Preview, or just go back to your tab. You can see that this opened us up the preview, would open it up in a new tab. So you can simply just go back and then play with the parameters from here. And then you could hit that Create New Preview button that you would see depicted after you changed it, and view what any of those changes would have made. So we'll go ahead and save the model for now, though. I'm gonna bring it up, make sure everything's squared away. You can go and implement that save model. And so now it's going to be loading there on the models page. So once you click on that save model, you can see it's going to be down here towards the bottom. We have this virtual event 1, this test 1. This is the matrix that we were looking at. It's processing the model here. And once it's done processing, once it's ready to go, it's going to move it from down here up top to your live models. So, and then you can kind of view it, you can play with it and do what you want from there. So that's a kind of an initial example there of the matrix modeler. And so as you remember, there's two other opportunities, there are two other strategies that you could come in and implement in the model builder tool. The next one that we're going to take a dive through for most of the rest of this session this afternoon is going to be the FSM modeler. So if you want to build a new model, come up top, click on create new model, and then you can come in and change, instead of selecting matrix, we're going to select FSM. I'm going to click next, and it's going to take us to a slightly different looking page than the one that we had previously. So the FSM, the fund score method, is what FSM stands for. It's a different kind of model building or strategy that you can use here in the tool. Instead of looking at things from a strictly relative strength matrix point of view, it's going to be looking at things by fund score. So as I mentioned, the tech attribute score for stocks goes from 0 to 5, 0 being the worst, 5 being the best. Fund scores for ETFs and mutual funds, similar kind of approach, but score goes from 0 to 6, 0 being the worst, 6 being the best. Again, those scores are only available for ETFs and mutual funds. You can look at stocks in the FSM model builder, but we would recommend kind of using it for funds there by nature of that fund score. So again, going to be looking at that fund score from 0 to 6, and basically what an FSM model does and what we've utilized it there in the pre-made models we have available, it's simply taking an inventory of names and then sorting that inventory by that score, and holding the set evaluation points, and it's going to buy the top names that you tell it to buy that score, buy the highest scoring names, and then hold those names until the next evaluation. So the fund score again goes from 0 to 6, but it looks at 19 different factors that go into that score calculation. So it will change pretty much every single day. Now you might have a fund score that goes from a 5.23 to a 5.24, or you might have a day where a fund score goes from a 5.23 to a 4.23. It really just depends upon the movement for that particular day. So because of that, that's why we utilize a set evaluation points for the FSM models. So you can select those evaluation points on the next page, but just one thing to kind of keep in mind when you're going through and building out the strategy from there. So for a more kind of in-depth review of the fund score system, that is another breakout session that is actually occurring here now. So again, you will get a replay of that particular session. And again, always more than welcome to reach out to us with any questions you have. But won't spend too much more time there on the background of the fund score. But again, just need to know that score goes from 0 to 6, 0 being the worst, 6 being the best. So coming in here, this is going to be where you can pick your inventory that you want sorted by that score. You can come up here, click on this Add Assets button, and it'll bring up a nice little pop-up where you can come in. You can either search through symbols if you want to just simply symbol search from here. You can click on this drop down and then import any other kind of names that you wanted to from different areas on the platform. If you like using the team builder tool, you can import a team and team inventory from here. Portfolios, if you have a portfolio that you want to move over, you can do that directly from this page. To different mutual fund families, ETF providers, you can see that here as well. So let's say we click mutual fund families. You want to go down and you want to pick a particular family. You can select that, let's say American funds. It's going to bring up all the different American funds funds that we have available here on the platform. You can see the respective scores associated with them. And if you want to move anything over, you can simply check these names. It'll bring it over to a stage ticker, and then you can add those tickers directly there to the model. We're going to go ahead and remove those for now, though, because we're going to go in and utilize a portfolio. So when we go up top, you can see portfolios is one of the selections that we have available there for you. So this is going to be anything that you've kind of uploaded in the system as a portfolio. You can then come in and take that inventory and put it directly in the model builder tool instead of having to go through and type in every ticker to add in your inventory. So I went ahead and made a portfolio here of First Trust funds that have at least 100 million in net assets. So First Trust FSM inventory. This is just I simply use a screener tool to filter for First Trust ETF inventory down to names that have at least 100 million. So just one thing to kind of, variety of different ways you can come in and build a portfolio. That's just one route that I went to go in and utilize it. So you want to come in here, you can see the names depicted here. There's 70 of those particular names that are in this portfolio. So you can go ahead and select all instead of having to click all of those little check boxes. It'll add all the tickers over here to your stage tickers. And then you can just click that add tickers to directly add them here to your inventory page. once those are all depicted, you can see each of those here. You can see some basic information about them, such as the name of the particular fund, how far it goes back, as well as a price and score and relative risk score there as well. Any that you wanted to go through and kind of add in a play with, you can exit any out. You can also go back and add assets to add more. So let's say, okay, I like this inventory, 70 funds, wide variety. We're going to have equity funds in here, fixed income funds, international funds, wide variety of kind of potential things that could rise to the top of that score ranking. But I want to include a cash proxy. So let's go in and let's add money market. So simple search, just going to type in MNY MKT, and that's going to bring up the money market proxy. Go ahead and add that, add tickers, reset the inventory from there. And so then it's going to reload that page. You can see all of the inventory depicted here. And if you're comfortable with that, you go over and click on this next button. This will bring you over to the strategy page, which is going to look similar to the one that we had for the matrix, but obviously be slightly different because we're not looking at matrix rank, we're looking at fund score. So again, you can see instead of sorted by any kind of relative strength comparison, it's sorted by that fund score. So it's top scoring fund, QCLN, Clean Energy Index fund there, fund score 5.97. So pretty near perfect fund score there. Again, the highest you can go is 6, so 5.97 is close to kind of the highest you'll see. You will see some 6s occasionally, but that's pretty darn near perfect there. So you can see the rest of the funds depicted here. Again, all in white because we haven't given the model any parameters. We want to come in and give it a pre-made strategy. This is where you can come in and select any of the kind of preset examples that we have. So let's say we wanted to do top 2, top 5. That's typically what we're looking at from a score perspective. But looking at it either as an end of month eval or in a seasonal quarter. So a seasonal quarter is something that we have kind of in most of our pre-made FSM models. It's looking at it 4 times a year, so on a quarterly basis, but not your typical calendar quarters. It's looking at it there trying to capture the market seasonality. So the whole sell in May, go away, come back in November. So those models would be evaluated at the beginning of the month of February, May, August, and November. So just one kind of brief aside if you're just wondering what seasonal quarter is, and that's what it is, 4 times a year at the beginning of those respective months. But for now, we're going to go ahead and kind of build our own. So we want a target number of holdings, could do 5. Let's do 10 as our target number, pretty wide variety of names. Our buy criteria, we want to do rank based. We want to make sure on evaluation, only purchase positions ranked at or above 10. We want to hold those top 10 names. Sell criteria. So as we touched on before, we wanted to give the matrix model a little bit of room to move because we're looking at it at kind of the monthly eval there and give it a little bit of room to move from a relative strength perspective before being removed from the model. Typically with FSM models, though, we're not typically going to be looking to give it as much room to move. You certainly can come in and play with that if you'd like, and that's definitely something that could be prudent. But for the purposes this afternoon, we're going to look at this by top 10. If it's not in the top 10 at an evaluation, we're going to go ahead and sell it and move it in the names that are in the top 10. So especially if you're looking at things on a seasonal quarter basis, that's kind of the typical route that we would go there as well. So just one thing to keep in mind when we're looking at the evaluation frequency for this test, though, we're going to look at it monthly. I'm just going to go the last trading day of each month just to get at some examples, some rotation within here too. So then you get down and it's pretty much the same advanced options that we had before. Score threshold is going to be a little bit different. So score threshold is how much, what you want the threshold to be in your score ranking. So if 0.1 is simply saying, okay, if these scores, as you can see from this particular ranking, they go out to 100s place, that you go out actually a few decimal points further than that, we just display them out to 100s. But the 0.1 threshold is let's say if FIW moves above QQXT at the next evaluation with a 5.66 versus a 5.65, we wouldn't necessarily sell QQXT because it's still pretty close in score. So we do utilize the 0.1 score threshold typically throughout most of our FSM models. So if it's within 0.1, even if it's beating it from the score perspective, if it's within 0.1 of score, we're not going to sell out of something just to kind of reduce the overall turnover associated with the portfolio. So we'll leave it as that default there for now. A rebalance drip, that's going to be the same. Sweep down indicators also going to be the same, but for here, again, we're looking at it from the score perspective instead of the relative strength perspective. So we will go ahead and implement that money market. Remember, we added money market to our inventory. We'll go down and we'll select money market, sweep down rank. I'm going to say 10, swept to security. Could do a kind of maybe a short-term treasury fund if we wanted, but we're going to go ahead and just use that money market ticker as our swept to security. So leave it as that set for now. We can see money market is pretty far down in our scores ranking right now. It also is designated there by that little sweep, that little broom to designate that's your sweep down indicator. So pretty low for now, but could potentially rise if things did kind of take a turn for the worse. So nice to have there from a score perspective. So come in here, feel comfortable with this. We'll click on this next button. And then this will bring us over to the same kind of overlay page that we would have had on the prior, on the matrix modeler, right? Have the opportunity to come in and either sort things by score, volatility, dividend yield, or our risk. So different parameters you can come in and sort that top 10 by if you wanted to. Again, this isn't necessarily going to make too much of a difference because for this particular example, we're just looking to buy the top 10 and sell it if it moves to 11. So if you wanted to change that, if you wanted to implement some overlays here, you would have to widen that sell threshold a bit. And widen the buy criteria too. So just one thing to kind of keep in mind when you're coming in to implement this. If you're just looking to buy the top 10 and you set your buy and sell criteria as such, then you're not going to really have the ability to add overlays. You would need to widen out those criteria from your target number of holdings if you wanted to add overlays here. So just one thing to keep in mind. Since we're not adding any overlays, we'll leave it as is for now. Then we'll go on over to next. Again, bringing us back to that preview or that kind of final page before we hit preview. We can implement any other kind of additional benchmarks or anything from here. Change the name, change the symbol, use the same selections that we would have previously. And then we can go ahead and click on this create preview button to bring up the preview. Again, we can come in and if you clicked on that button, it would bring you to that kind of loading page. We've already kind of pre-done that here. So we have this model depicted, the FSM test. Again, same looking preview page that we would have had previously with this example. We're looking at pretty solid returns for this model as well compared against the S&P. But keep in mind too that this inventory is not strictly equity. So even though it's compared against the S&P 500, there could be times where some other funds, maybe fixed income funds, were higher scoring at a particular point in time. That those could come into the model. So the kind of one of the beauties of the FSM model building process is that it's just going to give you whatever's strongest from a score perspective is going to be what's held in the model. Doesn't necessarily it's not necessarily dependent upon the relative comparisons to the other names in your inventory. Each score is kind of separate, right? So the scores are all calculated the same fashion, but the scores are not dependent upon what you're comparing it against. So one thing kind of to keep in mind that can be pretty helpful when you're coming in and utilizing the FSM tool. So if we're in a kind of a downturn market environment, kind of a bearish market, equities are out of favor, but fixed income's doing well, then fixed income's probably going to be the higher scoring funds, and that's going to be what's held in the model. So the FSM models, one of the kind of beauties of them is that they're flexible from a standpoint of in terms of what can be included depending upon the market environment. So coming down, you can see the same different statistics and criteria that we had depicted previously as well. A pretty solid year-to-date returns. Standard deviation is a little bit higher. Still have a better Sharpe ratio. Max 6-month drawdown. That's substantially better. That's kind of by nature of that having some of the other like fixed income or alternative related funds in here that if equities aren't doing well, like the S&P 500 max drawdown was 42%. Well, then the model is going to rotate out of equities and move into something that's holding up better, maybe like fixed income. You can see that would help out that max drawdown. Turnover is pretty substantial. So again, because the score is something that changes pretty much every day, has the potential for a lot more kind of rotation between those names at the top. So that's one reason why we try generally with many of the models we see, we pivot typically towards that seasonal evaluation and could also help reduce that turnover too by widening that sell threshold. So that could be another thing to come in and play around with. But again, that's what we hope to be one of the beauties of the tools that you can come in here, you can see how things look. Yeah, things look pretty solid, but hey, that turnover is just way too high. I wouldn't actually want to implement that. You can go back, change your parameters, and then hit that preview button again to see what changing that would have done until you get down to something that works best for you. So with that there, I know we're running close to time here, so I did want to, as a final run through, go on over to where you would see any models that you've saved. So if you go back, you can go back either to the custom models page and you can click on that view button. So we'll go ahead back to the broader custom models page from here to view, see if that model that we created is done. And so that'll bring you back into your custom models control panel. And when you get back to that particular page, if the model's done, it's going to again move down from that draft models down here up to the top where we had it previously. So we do have it as done. You can see virtual event. This is the model that we made today. Created date 12/10/2020. That's the one we want. So when a model's done, you can come and you can click on this evaluate button if you want the model to be run now. So if, even though it's a monthly eval model, if you remember, this is the matrix model we set to run monthly, but if you want it to run now, you can evaluate it. You can go in and kind of hard set it to run whenever you want it to, but otherwise the system's going to check it every month. If you want to build a model with the same parameters, maybe a different inventory, you can use this clone button to create a clone of the model and then change the inventory and run with it from there. Any kind of other changes you want to make to this particular model, you can use this settings cog, but we want to use this view button to go in and view the models. When you click on this view button, it's going to take you from this custom models control panel actually into the normal model portfolios page that we have. If you notice over on the left-hand side of the screen, under the normal models page, you have a variety of different filters you can select, and one of those is the custom models filter. So that's all that hitting view does. It selects the custom models and takes you in. You can click on the model, and then you're going to get the same little pop-up that you would for any other model that we have on the system. So you can come in, you can see the details associated with your rules. You can see the current holdings that are going to be held there in the model. If you want to go ahead and let's say you had 500,000 you wanted to put into the model, update shares. You can see how many shares of each particular stock to purchase, and then go ahead and purchase those shares. Click on this little bell icon right here, alert updated. So if you click on that bell, it's simply letting the system know, hey, I want you to send me an email when there's a change. So even though you know when the changes could potentially could come at the end of any month, then the system's going to go ahead and send you an email to the email address associated with your account if there's any changes to this model. So same kind of functionality that we would have here as we would for any of the other models available on the platform. But again, you would need that one thing to note, you do need to come in and click that bell icon to blue. The system's not going to default your custom models to be selected because you might just want to use them for testing purposes or if you want to build benchmarks or anything like that. So you do need to actually come over and then set that alert on in order to get an alert that the model has changed. But any other kind of changes you would see from there, you can see the historical changes here within the trades. You can also get at some more in-depth stats associated with the particular model. Nice little sector breakdown of what you have. You can go in and click on this like risk drop down too, get turnover associated with it. And then any of the kind of risk metrics that you wanted to look at, your max drawdown, upside downside capture can be pretty helpful to come in and utilize too. So variety of additional information you can come in and use, and same kind of information that's available for the normal models, pre-made models that we have available on the platform. So with that, I think that covers most of what we were looking to touch on here this afternoon. We didn't get a chance to run through the static allocation model, but just in terms of some of the use cases, I ran through some potential examples of maybe utilizing the static allocation model for a client's portfolio that they previously would have had for comparative purposes. You can also use the static portfolio to combine models. So let's say you want to if you want to use that FSM model that we made and save that, you want to use this model as a satellite to hold 10 stocks too, but have that kind of FSM model be your core. You can use the static allocation model to pair things together, combine these models together to see what those would have looked like from a backtesting perspective. So a lot of versatility that you can do here with the model builder tool. With that, again, my name is Ian Saunders. Thank you very much for joining us here this afternoon.